All right, welcome everyone to Design Perspectives. Today we are talking about designing for sustainability. We have three wonderful, esteemed guests here with us today. But before I introduce them, this is going to be a very dynamic dialogue that would love to engage in conversation at the end. Conversation and questions can go in the chat. And please do those in the chat. We will be filtering through those and making sure that Gabe, Sean, and Ben get those questions. And without further ado, our speakers with you today who are going to have this dialogue are Benjamin from Gensler, Gabe Wing, who leads MillerKnoll's sustainability, and Sean McDowell, who leads MillerKnoll's innovation. And I didn't introduce myself. I'm just the introductory. I'm Casey Barclay. I'm the director of MillerKnoll's A&D strategy. So welcome, and we look forward to this dialogue. I will let you all take it away.
Wonderful. Hey, thanks, Casey, and good afternoon, everyone, or good morning to some of you, perhaps. As Casey mentioned, I'm Gabe Wing, and I have the wonderful opportunity to help guide the conversation today with two amazing folks. And I'd like to allow them to introduce themselves a little bit more. And so, Ben, I would love to hear more about your role at Gensler. And I know when we talked previously, your title I find very intriguing. So I'd love to learn more about you, to share your title with the group, as well as the scope of your remit at Gensler.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me to be part of this discussion. I'm excited to re-engage with you all, and it's so great to see so many familiar faces and names on the participant list. So looking forward for some lively dialogue at the end of this. As Gabe mentioned, I'm Benjamin Holsinger. I'm with Gensler, and I sit in our Washington, D.C. office. And my passion is sustainability, and that's what I've done my entire career. And I started out as a sustainability strategist, mainly working on lead projects, dabbling in workplace well-being, before moving to my current role and title, which is the Global Design Resilience Leader for the Product Development Practice Area. Now, it's a mouthful, but what I do is I work with our manufacturing partners to make products that we design more sustainable. A lot of people know Gensler for the interior architecture work that we do, the base building architecture work, but we do much more than that. We have an entire suite of strategy and consulting services, urban planning, master plans, airports, stadiums, anything and everything in between. And we also do product. So carpet, task chairs, systems furniture, lighting fixtures, bathtubs, faucets, millwork pools, you name it, we do it. We have over 300 products in our portfolio. And so I work with those manufacturers to help them understand what sustainability means to Gensler and how that should translate into a product that we design and that they manufacture together. So that's my day-to-day. I also wear another hat, which is the manufacturer liaison for our recently released Gensler Product Sustainability Standards, also known as GPS. And that, for those of you who don't know, it's a performance-based criteria focused on sustainability, and it's built on the AIA Materials Pledge and the Common Material Framework. And that's how I've gotten to really get to know Gabe over these probably the past 6 or 7 months as we coordinate on that to move the industry forward. So that's me, and that's enough. Sean, I want to hear more about you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really excited for today's conversation. I've always been really passionate about sustainability as well. So, hi, Sean McDowell, Senior Vice President of Innovation at MillerKnoll. I've been here about a year and a half. Most of my career was spent at Nike doing different industrial design jobs, creative director roles, innovation and sustainability. So for me, this has just been a really exciting opportunity to invent in all new spaces. And so, yeah, thrilled to have this discussion.
Wonderful. And I know that having had the chance to work with both Sean and Ben. They have a tremendous amount of knowledge in this area, and I hope to just give everyone a sneak peek inside all of the amazing information inside both your heads. And I think as we jump into the conversation today, I would love to hear from both of you why sustainability is important to your organizations, Sean, our organization, and how do you define it? So, right, we go a lot of different directions, but when you think about your role inside Gensler, Benjamin, why is sustainability important? And you touched on a couple different things related to the products that your world manufactures, but I would love to hear more about what sustainability means to you and Gensler and why it's important.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know very early on in my career, I would be very overwhelmed with trying to define sustainability, right? Because it means so many different things to so many people. And, I'm a problem solver, and what do I focus on? What does sustainability mean to me? Because, I could do everything from a product scale to a manufacturing process to thinking, urban and global. So, how do we find that? I think that's a great question, and I'd love to hear from maybe people in the audience at the end. How do they define it? Um, I look at it as reducing our impact on the environment, right? Everything we do is going to have an impact, but how do we reduce that? And for Gensler, we realized that we're a big voice in the room, and I think in 2021 we did 6,000 projects, 6 billion square feet of work, and that's a very large portfolio, and it's a large percentage of total A&D work, and it's our responsibility to do it right. And I'm a firm believer that good design is sustainable design. I think that sustainability is the norm. I always approach any project that we're working on as we have stated our public commitments and what we're doing. And so that is the reason clients are coming to us. So to me, it's not even an ask to have. Rather, it's what is expected of us. And in fact, AIA has said that much, right? It's part of our due diligence. Our clients hire us to do the best design, and the best design is sustainable design.
Excellent. Sean, can you
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty good
how do you think
segue. I mean,
about
that
sustainability?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's a great setup. And I think one of the things that attracted me to MillerKnoll in the first place was just this long legacy of sustainability, going all the way back to G.J. Dupree in the 1950s, talking about being a good corporate steward. That's pretty amazing. And the products that we build last a really long time. And I think that's a really critical part of what you had mentioned, Ben, which is good design is sustainable design. I think there's a lot of different topics that we could kind of get into, whether it's the design itself or the material selection or being energy efficient or reducing waste, working on the entire supply chain, and then sort of how certificates and standards kind of help move us in a good direction. But I think from my perspective, I think if what I've been really excited about, like I would say in the last 18, 24 months or so, is just the dramatic increase in number of people that are talking about this. This is sort of a must-have now. This is no longer a nice to have. There's not much of a debate over it. It's how do we do it in the best possible way?
Right. Sean, I love that you mentioned legacy. When I talk to designers in the built environment about sustainability, I phrase it exactly that way. We need to leave a legacy that we can be proud of, so that when we look back on our lives and the work that we put out in the world, we can be proud of it. I always and I tell this to any manufacturer, not just because I'm on a call with you all, but whenever I'm talking with manufacturers about sustainable design and whatever products we're designing, I always give the Eames lounge chair as an example. It is a timeless classic design, built of quality materials, and they are handed down. And then I give the example of our Eames executive chairs in our Houston office. It's been around for 50 years, and all of them have made every move that that office has done. And so the first step to sustainable design is quality design. We're not designing things, for the color of the year or the hot trend of the year, right? We need to be thoughtful and mindful of that. So, and again, I say that no matter who I'm talking to. So you all have some great products in your portfolio you should be proud of.
Appreciate the kind words about our products, Benjamin. And I think that's one of the things that, Sean, I think our company does a really excellent job is combining, timeless design, heirloom quality, to make sure our products are durable, and having those products that just endure and last is the best way you can reduce your overall footprint. Thinking about some of the words that you mentioned that resonated with me earlier in your comments, Ben, were responsibility, and this notion that as organizations, we have a responsibility for our legacy, what we put in the marketplace, the buildings we design, the products we make. And I know there's a shared sense of commitment between our respective organizations. And if I pick up the thread related to clients and customers, you both touched on that a little bit, and our clients expect it. I think one of the challenges that we've seen, though, from some clients who maybe are just getting started in this journey is that sustainability costs more. And how would you respond to that when you end up with a customer who's like, hey, I care about sustainability, but it's going to cost more? Does that question up, and how do you navigate that?
That's always a question, especially whenever I worked in the lead world. How much more does a lead building cost? Well, it depends, and I always feel like I jump into lawyer jargon. Well, it depends, but it really does, right? No, it's impossible to know. If I design this building today, would it cost more? Maybe not. What if I had designed a more sustainable building? It wouldn't be the same building. So it's really hard to compare those costs. Certainly if we follow kind of the basic design principles of sustainable design, there are moves that we can take that aren't additional costs. I think what we're going to be looking at in the future with costs is costs associated with embodied carbon that we can't avoid. I think that we'll be looking at, we always go through a VE, value engineering exercise, and, we're looking at first cost of product. I think that in the future, clients will be looking at VEing in a first cost of embodied carbon that they can't avoid below a baseline. It's coming. The SEC has made regulations around it already. Different jurisdictions have made that. So, and unfortunately, it's money that talks. And so it's an important question. And that's something that I always tell designers, if we have a client that might not care about sustainability, because, we do have those, we have to phrase sustainability in a way that makes sense to them. And oftentimes that's in dollars and cents. So we as storytellers, as designers, we have to figure that out. And that's the nut that we have to crack in order to carry these conversations forward and make sure that happens on every project, not just the ones that really care about it, but the ones who might not be as passionate or as educated about it.
Yeah, I see it as my job to make everyone on this call's life easy, right? I'll do the hard work. Our teams will invent new things. We'll reduce our carbon footprint. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we've got to make incredible products that you want to specify. And that means like the best performance, the best style, the best features and benefits. We have to deliver it on time. We have to do all of these things, and we have to have it, be sustainable and a lower carbon footprint. So there's a lot of people that talk about a green tax or things just costing more. Sometimes that is just the nature of innovation. You're inventing a material from scratch that didn't exist 5 years ago, and you're going up against something that has been around for 80 years and has a strong supply chain. Sometimes that happens, but on the long haul, that price is going to come down and you're going to order more of it and you get economy of scale in it and it's going to
Right.
improve. But there's other times where you can eliminate waste, and waste is wasteful and it costs money to be throwing stuff out. And so there are quite a few areas where doing the right thing actually cuts costs. And so I think we have to balance all of these things together, but ultimately at the end of the day, you have to have what we call a no compromises product. Gabe and I talk about this a lot, but there's a lot of products that never really took off from a sustainability perspective until they were really good. I use energy efficient light bulbs. The first generation was yellow and dim and twice as expensive, and you're constantly making compromises. Like, that's not a good product. But as soon as it started getting where it lasts 10 years and it's a bright white and it's on everybody's shelves and it can fit into your same light fixtures today, that it's absorbed. And so that's why I think it's our duty to make incredible products and make them at an accessible price with great features and benefits.
Yeah. And I think an important part of that conversation that is going to be quickly, at top of minds is circularity, right? Designing for disassembly, designing for reuse and refurbishing and, remanufacturing, whatever we want to call it. Right now, I have seen that process can cost more, but that people are willing to do it. And so I'm hoping that as this becomes more familiar, people figure out how to do it more efficiently, that cost will also come down so that is the norm. Because I think for the most part, at least on the built environment side, we have figured out energy efficiency, right? We know we need to do energy models. We know we need to have an efficient system and an efficient envelope. We just have to do it. But the next biggest thing that keeps me up at night is the embodied carbon story, which we've done some research at Gensler through our Gensler Research Institute on embodied carbon versus operational carbon. And we found that the embodied carbon of the initial building and fit out of a building, while large, is far surpassed by the 5, 10, 15-year tenant turnover of that space over the life of the building. And so circularity is going to become a really important conversation in all of our projects. But of course, cost comes up with that too.
No, but you're right, Ben, that becomes the ultimate thing, right? If we can sort of start measuring carbon from its origin, the raw materials that go into the products, everything that goes through the entire supply chain, and then capture it at the end of life. It's something that we really believe in, that make sure you have those durable products. I think in particular, some of our task seating chairs, we talked about Eames Lounge and Ottoman, but we see this with Aeron all the time too, where it's around for 30, 40 years,
Yeah.
and you can pass it down from generation to generation. And there's still a lot of life left in these products. And, let's make sure that we can either relocate them, reuse them, resell them, or if there's no other option, recycle them and put them into another product.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing innovation in the marketplace too around reuse and take back programs. Talking about logistics, it really is difficult for a manufacturer to have a take back program, right? You can't ship everything out and then expect it all to be shipped back in. That's wasteful of, transportation, carbon of transportation. So, you see third party marketplaces hopping up. And it's interesting whenever I talk with manufacturers about that, a lot of people scratch their head and they're like, well, you mean my job is to sell things and now you want me to not sell things and make it circular? I'm like, well, yes. So figure out how to be part of that solution, right? And I think that's where some real innovation is going to come.
Yeah, Ben, I think you're onto something there. Having been involved with circularity or cradle to cradle when I joined the company 20 plus years ago, and working with Bill McDonough to help us think about how to incorporate circularity into our design process. That notion of changing our relationship. Today, it's transactional for the most part, right? You buy furniture, you go away, and then when you need furniture, you show up again. If we're working in a circular business model, I'm going to know when you need new furniture, and I can help you dispose of the no longer needed furniture in a responsible way, in the best way possible. But that is a tough nut to crack. And I think about, we've got a program today called Repurpose that does those things that Sean mentioned, but it's still not as widely adopted as we'd like. And so I think there's some awareness issues around that. And I'd say the program, it's imperfect, but it's a start. What do you think the role of government is in promoting take back? We've seen take back laws for furniture exist in France as an example. Today we have to pay a bottle deposit in France for office furniture that we sell to subsidize recycling. The downside to that, though, is that everybody pays the same fee. So if Sean helps us develop materials that are more recyclable today, I pay the same as somebody who designs a horrible product that can't be recycled, that has lousy materials in it. And so I'm just curious if you have thoughts on what's the role of government in all of this?
Well, I mean, I look at government as, when we get to the regulation point, that's helping the people catch up, right? That's where we are when it comes time to regulation, with a few exceptions, right? Like I think maybe California, and I know here in Washington, D.C., we have some pretty stringent sustainability building codes. So that's progressive, but I usually think of the world in groups of thirds. You have a third of the people who are going to be on your side, cheering with you. Sustainability is right. We believe in climate change. You have a third of the people who might need some convincing, some education. And then you have a third who are going to come kicking and screaming when the regulations come. That's how I tend to look at it. And in fact, those numbers have shifted a lot. It's more around 7 to 10% of those kind of non-believers that are going to need to be pulled along, kicking and screaming. And then a much larger percentage of people who are really on board. I actually think that the design world needs to do a better job of advocating for material reuse. We as an industry, and I'll say Gensler included, don't do a very good job at celebrating the moments when circularity is done and it's done well. I think there's a lot of misconceptions that design for disassembly or reused materials is, a couch made out of shipping pallets and cushions with a lampshade that's a white bucket. And certainly, yes, it can be that, right? There's a time and a place for that. I'm sure we've all been there, but it can also be beautiful and elegant design. And I think that we need to do a better job at celebrating those moments, and talking about those with our clients. And I'll share a story. It's not a client story of mine, it's a client story of somebody else's, but they were redoing an office and they said, hey, you know what? We're proposing that you keep your carpet. It's fairly new, still has a lot of years of wear in it. And the client was like, absolutely not. No, we want new, like this, we want new, top to bottom. They developed several pallets, presented to the client, and the client chose a pallet with the carpet in, and the carpet that was in that pallet was their existing carpet. And they said, do you realize what this carpet is? And they put it on the floor like it's your exact same carpet, and you chose it again. And the client was probably a little embarrassed, but it saved all that embodied carbon, and it proved to them, hey, you can reuse things and it's okay. We have this misconception that reuse is not good, or it's dingy, or it's old.
Yeah, I would love to see a little bit more participation from government. I mean, I think anytime they're a little bit tougher on us, it's just like a coach that is pushing you to be your best, and so, our current government's not that, productive, and getting that much stuff done. But this does feel like it is one of those areas where, because we had fuel economy standards for automobiles, that helped promote growth and innovation and coming up with better ideas. Now we have a lot of really good hybrid and electric vehicles that are options for people, and that just improves consumer choice. And so I think sometimes, the European Union tends to be leading this a little bit. And so they've been pushing us, I think, in a really good, really healthy way to come up with better solutions. And they're putting timelines on things, which, that works too. It just makes us hustle that much more. If you never have a deadline, it's like asking your kids when they want to turn in their homework. You'll go on indefinitely.
Yeah. Do you find that you're carrying lessons learned from your market in France back to the US or other markets?
I'd say it's slow. It's it's not been as widely adopted as sort of I put on my sustainability hat as I would have hoped. I think it's still early days in that space, and so I'm in the same spot as you. And I know I asked a question around government, but I think government and regulations are part of the answer. But I believe that corporations and voluntary standards can move a little bit quicker. And I think it would be really insightful to hear about the genesis of the GPS and sort of the hopes and aspirations for that with the audience. I know that I'm personally interested, so I'd love to get hear from you, Ben, about what was impetus for creating the standard, and if we look back 5 years from now, like how will you know if it was successful?
Yeah, well, the great news is that we can look back 4 months and 25 days and have seen that it's successful. We're already seeing manufacturers change how they manufacture, change suppliers to more sustainable options, um, fast track and streamline, certifications and development of EPDs. So it is making a change already, and we didn't realize it would be that quick. So we're really excited to move ahead 5 years and to be able to look back. But touching quickly on how this all got started, yeah, I think it was 2018 we signed on to the Paris Climate Pledge. It may have been 2019 we announced our Gensler City Climate Challenge, GC3, all these acronyms. And part of that commitment, which was, reducing, eliminating our associated carbon with our built work by 2030. Part of that was realizing if we're going to do that, we need to have deep expertise in each one of our 33 practice areas, right? And so that's how my role became to be. It came to be at Gensler, right? We realized we need to have deep expertise on sustainability in all these practice areas, because sustainability for product is very different than sustainability for sports, very different than sustainability for government or critical facilities, what have you. With GC3, we launched our Green Materials Initiative, and that was really turning towards the industry to understand where we are with products and materials, what roadblocks there are, and if Gensler can use our voice to help remove any of those roadblocks. So we had roundtable discussions. We would bring task share and systems furniture manufacturers together all around the same table. Let's hear where your challenges are. Let's hear what's going great so we know what to celebrate, and can we learn something from there and take it to another product category. And from that, the two big takeaways from manufacturers were, please, no more certifications. At that time, it was like a new certification du jour. And this is not me, hating on certifications. They have their time and their place, and they are helpful in moving the market, and they make a lot of sense to a lot of people, companies, depending on their needs. So we heard, no more certifications, please, and just tell us what you want, and we'll do it. There were so many certifications out in the world that people's heads were spinning. And that's actually how GPS got started. I was having conversations with manufacturers, helping them understand, what is cradle to cradle? Well, how is that different than Green Guard Gold? How is that different from Declare? Nobody knew. And so we created what we called at the time Gensler Prescription, GRX. And I think the blog post is still out there. we didn't care for the name, so we transitioned to a firm-wide effort and made the GPS, and it's based on the Common Material Framework, which is of course based on the AIA Materials Pledge. So it's 5 impact categories, 12 products right now in version 1, looking at everything from organizational commitments, right? So it's not just about a product, it's about working with people who really care, um, all the way through material health, and material ingredient disclosures and life cycle impacts. So that's the quick history of GPS and how we got to where we are today.
Oh, thank you. Super helpful, and very much appreciate not adding more eco badges to what I call the NASCAR effect. It seems like
Yeah.
to sell office furniture, we need 1 billion different eco badges. So you've done a really thoughtful job of curating and collecting the most relevant standards, and then providing a glide path for product manufacturers to end up in a better spot. So kudos to you and the team.
Yeah, thank you. I'll share that with them. Yeah, it's been a big effort, but really rewarding.
Hey, if I switch gears a little bit, I feel like I want to get your thoughts, both of you, about carbon offsets, right? We talked about circularity, we've talked about carbon a little bit, and what's your thinking around offsets? They're good and bad. I think there's pros and cons, but would love to get some insight maybe for the audience around your thinking about them as a useful tool.
From my perspective, I think it's Europe is starting to take the right position on this, which is you can't continue to make dirty, bad products and then plant a tree and say everything's okay. That's not a long-term strategy that's going to be successful. You got to do the hard work. You just got to make better products. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people are claiming offsets, and I think the word is getting out now, and things are starting to improve. What do you
Yeah,
think,
I'm
Ben?
right. Yeah, I'm right there with you, Sean. They're a nice to have and a nice to do. But when we're looking at products and comparing products, carbon offsets don't even fall into the equation, right? Because we're looking at scopes A1 through A3, and that's when we set global warming potential limits. That's what we're looking at across the board, because those are the scopes that you can compare, right? Because after you leave the factory gate, that's where each individual project team has to understand: is my project in California and I'm ordering a product from Spain, or am I ordering it from Mexico? you know um, so carbon offsets don't even fall on any of that, right? They're kind of off the scope chart for life cycle assessment. So yeah, we're on the same page. Nice to haves, good to do, but the first step is reducing your impact in the first place before you even start looking at that.
Well, it feels like we're making progress across the board from our conversation so far. I think oftentimes you can learn from maybe what some of the big struggles are. So, with your day-to-day work, if you could share 1 or 2 areas that maybe your team, your organization is struggling with, and I wonder how do you plan to get around it? So Benjamin, like you've got a bunch of things on your plate, and seems like GPS has been successful out of the gate. What areas is your team struggling with, and what help would you need to overcome it?
Um, you know, I think that our biggest challenge, to be honest, is our size. It's really difficult to get a firm of 7,000 professionals all on the same page, especially when, while we are one firm, we very much act like smaller local firms, right? Each office operates as its own unit, and that's great for our business in that community, but can be a challenge at times when we try to implement things on a global scale. So I think that's our biggest challenge that we face every day.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear some thoughts too when we get to the chat section, what other people are struggling with. I would say from our perspective, we're trying to change each of our materials to make them lower carbon materials. And I think there's some areas where we're starting to have some really good success, and we'll have some breakthroughs in the next year or two on substitutes for particle board, substitutes for plastics, substitutes for textiles and aluminum and leather. You'll start to see those rolling out. I think the one that starts to get really tricky in my mind is the steel industry. It is a great strength to weight ratio. You can recycle steel, that's good, but there's a ton of carbon that's sequestered in it, and it takes a lot of energy to melt it down and put it into another product. And so that one seems hard. And, I think we're just going to have to partner with the steel industry and start looking for some of those solutions. But that seems like one of the more challenging ones.
And I think maybe I'll add another challenge that I face. It's education. We're at a point where we really need to start thinking radically different about how we design, and that's hard. Going to designers who have been designing and winning awards for 10, 15, 20 years, and saying, hey, we have these sustainability goals. It might mean that we're going to have to think differently about how we design, and how we ideate, and think of some more innovative ways to do things, and that can be hard. And so I think taking the time to educate, with some empathy as well, is my biggest challenge. Especially when we start thinking about the circular economy, certainly specifying something that's new, that is built for design for disassembly or the circular economy, that's one thing. But when we start looking at using something that is now entering its second use life, that becomes very difficult, because now we have to understand all of these factors that we as designers aren't necessarily always trained to deal with, right? I need 500 task chairs for a space. 300 are available on the secondhand market. Where do I get the other 200 from? Do I buy them new? Are they going to match the 300 old? What about warranty and liability for those 300 old? When are those 300 that are used available? Who's getting them here? Where are they now? And so we have all these complexities, that we're not used to thinking about, because we're used to saying, I need 500 and I need them by this date and I need them in this configuration and color, and they magically get delivered and we don't have to think about it. So I think tackling the education, with some empathy is also a challenge I face.
Yeah, I think listening to both of your answers, right, I heard alignment across large organizations. I heard working at a different scale than we worked at in the past, this education piece. And to me, it's about collaboration. The problems we're wrestling with they're just too big to be solved at the individual organization level. And you know, I think about the way, Ben, your organization pulled together different sectors to have a conversation specifically around carbon about a year and a half ago or so. How do we leverage that and scale up? Because we're at the end of the day, we share common material platforms, whether it's steel, nylon 6, PET, whatever those platforms are. Our relative voice at MillerKnoll is small in the grand scheme of things, but if we can connect on these issues, I think we can solve the problems. Do you have any thoughts or insights or examples of how we might be able to start working more effectively at a different scale than we've done in the past?
Yeah, it's going to take the whole village, and when we started out in this GPS journey, we realized that we have a big voice, um, but even with a big voice, we can't do it alone. Everyone is going to have to play a part, and for the most part, everybody got along and played well together on all of those roundtable discussions. And so that was really reassuring to see that people were willing to come together, even with their competitors, to do the right thing. So I don't know if I have a particular example or solution or path forward, but I think the groundwork is there. I think that people understand that this is going to be the defining issue of our time. The time to act is now. And I think that we're going to see a lot more collaboration amongst our industry to get things done.
Yeah, I think we're getting to the point where as we have some of these innovations and breakthroughs, we're at that philosophy of, yeah, we should share this with the world. Maybe we give ourselves a 6 months, 12 months head start, but let's make it available to everybody. And I do think that there's a lot of smart people across the industry. And, if we can sort of take a moment to envision that better world and work together collaboratively to build a better future, that's really what it's all about.
Yeah. And that's one thing, that's why we made GPS public, right? Anybody can use it. Anybody. Other firms, manufacturers have at it, take it, explore it, expand on it, make it better. Let's have a conversation and get things started.
Wonderful. Hey, it was Earth Day on Monday, and as I was thinking about that and doing some homework before we had an internal seminar session to celebrate Earth Day, I found tons of coverage about what's not going well in the world. You find out, hey, climate change is happening. We're bleaching coral reefs. We're in the middle of the next big extinction event. What do you guys? I want to be an optimist, right? I like to think I'm an optimist. So in light of everything negative that's out there, what are the things that you both hang on to that make you feel positive about the future? What can you share related to that?
I
Anything?
hear you, right? I mean, it can be doom and gloom some days. You just read the news and it's like, oh goodness. I believe president of ILFI has instituted climate impact days or something like that, where employees can take off if they are impacted by climate change, whether that's a forest fire is enveloping your house, or you just read so much terrible, sad news about coral bleaching and it really hit you hard that day and you need to take a mental health day. Um, I think that's amazing and really innovative. Um, I like to think of our impact. I think it was Think Lab that did some research that said that we as designers, for every one decision we make, we have a 25-fold impact. And that's at kind of a general design firm, and that larger firms, it's 100-fold. So for every one decision we've made on choosing the right task chair or systems furniture, it is impactful times 100. And so I like to keep that in mind, that the work I'm doing is making a greater impact than me just switching out from paper towels to reusable rags at home, which is important and everybody needs to do that. But we have to remember that we need to undo everything that we've done in our lifetime, our parents' lifetime, our grandparents' lifetime, probably our great grandparents' lifetime, and great great grandparents' lifetime, right? To get back to these pre industrial levels. So I always try to keep a forward eye on educating with empathy to help somebody else understand and make that personal connection.
Yeah, I think that's right. It does feel big. It does feel intimidating. It does feel like, some days we're not making progress, and so that's tough. I try and encourage the team something we call the power of one, which is make one decision every day that makes us better than the previous day, and together we'll make progress. And I do think these things are adding up. I also get really, really inspired by my kids. I got 3 kids, and they are reminding me every day to, build better products and build a better future, give them something. And so it's one of the reasons why we work so hard is to try and come up with some of these solutions that really make a difference.
Appreciate both those answers. I'd say on my end, having been in this space for a while, Sean and Ben, when we talk to our suppliers today about our expectations around demanding better materials, they're finally in a position to start responding. And so, like, as I was thinking about this on Monday, to me, that's a major shift that we've seen over the past 2 years, where when we were asking for carbon footprint and lower carbon materials, they sort of looked at us funny. And we're getting to the point now where they understand that we're shopping, our clients and our customers are shopping based on carbon. And it feels like we're moving in the right direction. And then I hang on to this quote that's been attributed to Winston Churchill. And I don't know whether he actually said it, but allegedly, he said that you can count on Americans to do the right thing after they've exhausted every other option. And it feels like we're at the point where we've exhausted every option. So we're really smart across the globe, and I'm hopeful that we'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because I know that's not always been the case, right? I've heard horror stories of, other manufacturers going and asking suppliers for transparency, and they just say absolutely no, and then they can't use that supplier anymore. So now they have to go find a new supplier. I mean, so I'm glad to hear that the supply chain is starting to listen. And that also brings up another good point. Partner. We just keep partnering and keep educating. There was real concern when we started with GPS of excluding people. And in fact, that's the opposite of what we want. GPS is not about who can and cannot play, but rather it's a starting point for a conversation so that we can engage with those who might not be where they need to be and help them get to where they need to be. And that's been hugely successful. Evelyn,
Yes,
welcome. I think that
thank
means it's
you.
time for some Q&A.
Absolutely, it is. And thank you all for the amazing dialogue so far. We're going to take some of the questions here from the audience. So anyone in the audience, feel free to put any additional questions you have in the chat, and we'll get started there. So the first question I'm seeing, how do we make sure sustainable design comes all the way through the VE process with GCs? See it getting nixed because of costs in the later stages.
One thing I know our team is working on is having product overview pages that have a little green leaf in the corner that says made with sustainable materials, so that when you're going through the selection process, you can, select products that are more sustainable. You can even sort of shop green. Now that's sort of the furniture and the products inside, and this might be a little bit more targeted towards Ben, but I think from my perspective, I think just making things really easy so that you can make the right choices.
Yeah, and that's, with GPS, we're leveling the playing field. And so now in these 12 product categories, we only present the sustainable option. And that is reflected in our specifications. It's, if you don't spec it, you don't get it. And even when you do spec it, sometimes you don't get it. But, you have to make it clear from the very beginning, this is what the expectation is. Certainly, yes, you're not going to win every battle. But that's also why we started with the 12 categories that we did, right? Every project we work on has floors, ceilings, walls, furniture. So let's start there. And kind of going back to, Sean, what you were saying about like every day, take one step forward. All right, so you might not win the super sustainable product that you specified on this project today, but try it again tomorrow. And try to move something forward every day.
And I think the second question is pretty well related as well, but how do we get buy-in from the industry and all stakeholders to have sustainable design be the norm? Even if the customer doesn't ask for it, and I think we've talked a little bit about this already, and won't absorb the extra cost, who eats the extra cost of it? How can we change the standard process to incorporate the costs?
Yeah, I think we touched upon that a little earlier with, efficiencies of the supply chain. Once we have, when things are new, they tend to be a little more expensive. So I think the market will adjust for that. I think, again, I mentioned storytelling. we have to do some due diligence on our end to say, hey, this might be a little more expensive here, but you're going to be saving here. And we have to figure that out, right? And it's going to be different on every project. And understanding what's going to, make that client, make it resonate with that client.
Right. Yeah. You could buy that disposable product that falls apart in 2 years or 3 years. We need to start training some of that lifetime value, as being part of the conversation. And I was reading down into some of the other questions. I think it relates also to the potential of a repurpose program or a take back program. And I do think that becomes something really critical that we could all maybe work on together. Because if you sort of show that lifetime value, it's an heirloom, it's a product that lasts maybe 80 years, and can be refurbished along the way and still have value at the end of that time period. Um, of course, being able to find that network and get the right product to the right people, that does take quite an effort, but I think that's one of the next areas we're going to have to solve a problem for.
Yeah. And then also, just a note, I know when we were preparing for this webinar, we talked a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act. Make sure your clients are aware of that. There's a lot of money out there now to really dive deep into sustainable materials. So that could be an option to start covering some of these additional costs.
Yeah, maybe that's another one of those things that gets me optimistic. There's two startup companies, that said we actually wouldn't have gotten started if we didn't get funding from the government to help us. And they have some really good ideas, and we're helping them to sort of nurture those ideas and get them into production.
Awesome. And I think, so building on the last question, or the question around take back programs, or EPR models. So I think some people are looking for ways to get those toward other parts of the industry, contractors, flooring, lighting companies as well. How can we nudge the rest of the industry toward some of those more a take back program?
I think we touched upon it a little bit. I think we as an industry need to do a better job of sharing those stories and selling them, helping educate people against these misconceptions that something that is on its second life is lesser. And wouldn't it be great if we turned that completely on its head, and things that were used at their second life became more valuable? I mean, wouldn't that be amazing? Talk about thinking about innovation and changing the world. Imagine a future where, it's more expensive to throw something away than it is to reuse something. Why don't we focus on that?
Yeah, that's a great one. I also think with the take back program, we should be careful not to try and boil the ocean and make sure that we're conquering 100% of the products 100% of the time in every geography. I think there are baby steps that we can take. And I know we're coming from a MillerKnoll perspective, but a lot of our task chairs, those are easy to bring from one location to another. That feels like a baby step that is within our control and something that we can manage. Now, a work surface that's made from particle board and maybe it's a little chipped up, that is a lot harder to like refinish, refurbish, move to another location, have it be the right size and the right fit for a separate office building in a similar location. That's a little bit harder. But don't let perfection be the enemy of good. There's really smart things that we could do today that would help.
Ben,
Yeah.
I have a question in that line, and this is coming from me, but with what is the responsibility, or where are landlords leaning into this when we have 2 to 3 year leases and the sublease market super hot? How can design, and I think this goes to your education challenge as well, is obviously any company moving into a space workplace strategy and how we lay out space matters to them and their innovation that's highly unique. But when we're turning over space every 2 to 3 years, what are
Yeah.
some unique design things that we could look at in the built environment?
Yeah, there are so many pieces of the pie. And when you start talking about circularity, I can specify circular products all day long. You all can manufacture circular products all day long. But if at the end of the day, a tenant moves out of a space leaves all their stuff, and a landlord, their standard operating procedure is white box of space, period. It all goes to a landfill, right? So we really need to be engaging them, because I think they're going to be a critical part of this. Why not tour a prospective tenant through the space, see if there's anything they want to keep? It's they're missing from the conversation around circularity now, and we need to have it. We need to bring them to the table. I think that's a big challenge to them and GCs, right? Because why is it that a GC comes in and when a landlord says white box of space, they do it? Why don't they come in and say, hey, actually, I'm going to help you get some money back for this. We're going to put these on a secondhand market. We're going to keep this. Why can't a tenant have an option to say, hey, actually, I like all those glass front offices with demountable partitions. I'll keep them, and that'll save me money. Of course, then we can start looking at, well, if we're going to be doing 2-3 year leases, why doesn't a landlord own that furniture? Why doesn't landlord say, well, we're choosing products that can be reconfigurable and that are circular, so that maybe the tenant doesn't like the setup. That's okay. We'll reconfigure it. It's ours. We own it. We're going to do it for you. So I think there are a lot of options, but we have to bring them to the table.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
And note too, Ben, what you're setting up is also problems that we're trying to solve right now, which is create ultimate flexibility, so that you can reconfigure very quickly, very easily, that everything is sort of adaptable. Everyone's asking for that. So I think that's our responsibility to build the products to enable that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we talked about this too as we were prepping for this. I think for a while people have been trying to crack the nut of furniture leasing. I'm hopeful that it will have its heyday here soon. Gabe, I know you said you've been working on it, trying to get that done with your tenure there. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I think we're closer now than we ever have been before. And again, if I'm the optimist, I think we're going to figure out how to make that create economic value for everybody who's interested in it. It's just we do have to think differently about it.
Yeah.
Okay, we had one more question come in. So of the 1,300 plus architectural firms that have signed the net zero emissions goal for 2030, are there any initiatives in the furniture-based category for US-based projects specifying non-import products that is measurable? Anyway.
What do you think, Gabe? We've talked a little bit about this before. One, I don't have that much confidence that the government can walk and chew gum at the same time, as much as I would love it, right? Like nudge us. I think that would be really beneficial. What I see us having the capability to do is dramatically reduce the carbon that is going into products. Neutral, being 100% neutral is awfully difficult. But I think we will be there with products and offerings that have great features and benefits that you're looking for, but just in a dramatically lower carbon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as I read that question in the chat, I'm sort of guessing, but if I think about it, for us as a manufacturer of high quality, amazing products, competing with low cost goods that kind of look what we do, I think when you expand the definition of quality, and you shop on carbon and chemistry and durability, all of those things, like the total cost of a well-designed, well-manufactured product is lower, and that's hard to measure today. And I don't know that a standard is going to get there, but I think it gets back to, I'll pick up what Benjamin mentioned when you talk about education. Like there is a bunch of benefits of buying a great product from a great company that's doing the right things. That's hard to capture on a price tag. And so today it's a little bit, it's probably too much work for the average person to sort through, but I think GPS and standards like that take away some of the noise. and start to capture all the value that we put into our products.
Yeah, one thing we're exploring is here's the price tag and here's the carbon price, so that, apples to apples, you can go through, you can see what you're getting, what you're paying for, and what the carbon is, and you can match it with our competition.
Yeah. And a note on, I think that same question talked about non-import products. I think the architecture world has a role to play in that, right? While GPS only calls out scopes A1 through A3 for life cycle assessments and looking at embodied carbon, each individual project team that's doing life cycle assessments on their buildings and their projects need to take that transport into account. And so as we start looking at quantifying and either penalizing or incentivizing, depending on how you look at it, total embodied carbon, I think that's going to play into that conversation as far as, regional or local manufacturing, things like that.
Great. Well, we are at the top of the hour. So thank you to everyone who joined us today. Ben, Gabe, Sean, thank you for all of your insights as well. This has been a fantastic conversation and one that I think we're just looking forward to continuing to have. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see you
Thanks
all.
so much for
everyone.
having us. Great conversation.